7 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome to everybody. I'm glad y'all are on tonight. We've got a great presenter, and I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody except for our presenter, Paul. And Paul is the RRC for the Brighton Fire Department up outside of Rochester, New York, and he's been working in that capacity for a little while now. And so Paul's going to present tonight on a customer relations management software, as well as some interviewing techniques, and of which both he's probably pretty sharp on. He's certainly the sharpest dressed presenter we've had in almost a year of presentations now. So Paul, take it away.
Thank you, Spencer. And first of all, I'm not overdressed. I'm actually presenting or helping in a presentation of interviewing technique to some law enforcement in Connecticut. So I came straight from there. So that's why I look this way. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'd like to correct Spencer a little bit, since I have Rick Tracy on the line, who is actually our RRC. He took over from me a short while ago, doing a great job, but I'm still heavily involved. And that actually will be evident that we needed an RRC that was full-time, and this is part of the process of getting there, where we can all collaborate together. We can have the presentation up there, Spence.
Absolutely. Let's see. Let me pull it up here.
So my name is Paul Chambers. I work at Brighton Fire Department. Up until very recently, I was an associate member helping them with their recruitment. And my role has changed slightly, as we have employed a full-time recruitment and retention coordinator. I have just actually moved to being an exterior firefighter, so I can actually help out on the fire ground now. So what I'd like to go through today is to explain to you something about the Brighton Fire Department, how we were recruiting and where the need was, and how it's helping us collaborate with everybody involved in the recruitment committee.
Hang tight just a second, Paul. I'm having a little trouble getting I'll be ready in just a second. I forgot to click it over to slideshow mode first before I shared. And once I do that, I'll be all set. I apologize. I told Paul before we got on, the real challenge here would be the person running the AV stuff. So, all right, I think we're all set now.
So first slide will be the topics for tonight, and that is to explain a little bit about Brighton and Brighton Fire Department, to explain a little bit about the software that we chose and how we make it work for us. And the final section is, I was a police officer for many years, and I was taught a particular interview technique that is useful in many areas, and will particularly be useful when you're interviewing potential candidates. And I'll explain that at the end of the techniques that can help you discover whether someone is being totally truthful with you or not, which is always very useful. So next slide. Thank you, Spence. So just a little bit for context for Brighton. We are a town of approximately 36,500 people located in the suburbs of Rochester, New York. We have, these are all taken from like the census from a few years ago. We have a fairly interesting group of people. We have a lot of medical facilities, so we have a high Asian population, but 76% white, home ownership at 57%, and obviously those are our ideal candidates for recruitment. And we are a fairly affluent community. Brighton Fire Department I came on about 5 or 6 years ago now, asked by a chief who knew about my law enforcement background. And next slide, please, Spencer. We are 95 years of age this year. Our district is quite diverse. We don't just cover Brighton, we actually cover some other areas from other towns. And as it says, we are generally fairly residential. We have a lot of highways, we have medical facilities, we have several high-rise senior care and other buildings, and some higher education establishments. So a diverse response need for all those different sort of residences and buildings. Currently, or obviously it went down a little bit with COVID, but around 2,400 calls annually for all sorts of responses, significant numbers of EMS calls. It's about 60-40, I think, at the last sort of count. Next slide, please. We are proudly a combination department. This is the career side, 29 line firefighters, 4 group officers, as you can read, and 1 combination recruitment and retention and safety education person, and 4 admin members. Combined with that, the last number that I was given was 68 volunteer members. And so the little background to this is when I arrived, we were interviewing a number of people. Probably we were having 4 sessions a year, and the numbers were 2 or 3 each session were actually proceeding through to become members. We were the hard work of the board and members of the department and the commissioners. We got a SAFER grant, and clearly at that point we were looking to aggressively raise the number of members that were going to come into the department, and we did some advertising, and so you can see that in 2019 we actually took in about 11 members, and that was fairly easy to cope with. We were able to do that with just me handling some of the paperwork, and then myself and a commissioner were doing the interviews, and that wasn't really, we could cope, but there were still some signs that it was taking too long. Next slide, please. And this is the sort of video that we would show as part of the as part of the recruitment exercise to show to the community. It must be taxing your system. There's no sound, Spencer.
No sound. Let's thing. I apologize. Everybody, hang tight here as I negotiate Zoom, or Teams rather. Let's see here. And let's see. How about now?
Yep.
All right.
Happy birthday, dear Daddy. Happy birthday to you.
I'm not fireproof.
So what are you doing tonight anyhow?
Fire department, goulash dinner, 6 pounds of pasta. What about you?
Hey, no kidding, soccer and road food tonight. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Will do. I don't leave from tall buildings.
Can't hold back your light and expect to win. Gotta go harder. Oh, you gotta learn. Don't suppress your fire, baby, let it burn. Nobody can take that.
Superheroes don't have to work this hard.
The cake refrigerates. Go.
How's the food? Everybody like it?
Very good.
Very good.
Thanks for cooking, Marky.
You're welcome.
Superheroes don't have to work this hard.
I don't live in tall buildings. I'm not fireproof. Hey, buddy.
Brighton Fire Department has no superheroes, but we do have a superpower. And it's the same superpower that you have. We care deeply about our neighbors. That is why we have a long tradition of volunteer service. When neighbors help neighbors, our community is strong. Our day-to-day is not glamorous. We check detectors and car seats. We pump out basements. And we answer calls for elder care pretty often. There are services that require diligence and training and are so vital to a healthy community. We could use some help. We invite you to join us as we give back to the community that gives so much to us. Join us by becoming a volunteer with the Brighton Fire Department.
Thank you, Spence.
It's pretty good. I like it.
So, as you can see, we definitely upped our game, and we also participated in the wonderful training provided by Spencer with the RRC course and Chief Brow. They came to Brighton to teach us, and it was clear that the way we were doing things previously, it was necessary to change those ways to try and recruit more members. So the way we'd been doing it was having a members meeting, one per quarter. We were having 4 to 20 people come in person at the station with a varying amount of people, maybe 1 to 4 at each meeting trying to become a member. The process was becoming quite drawn out, and we needed to streamline it and make it easier for them to try and retain them and easier for us to manage. Next slide, please. So in combination with COVID, suddenly we could not have in-person recruitment. We were transitioning to online Zoom meetings, which were being publicized on Facebook. So now we were finding we had 25 to 35 people in attendance for our Zoom meetings, causing a rise in all of these inquiries. We were suddenly becoming, I would say Facebook generated a lot of inquiries, not necessarily a lot of members. And we needed to really make sure we could manage the process. We were increasing our exposure. We had adverts on XXI, local PBS network, and we had a big billboard. And that was all made possible again by the SAFER grant. So I knew that I needed something to help me manage this. And so I did some research, and this is, but I don't know how it's going to play. It was quite choppy for me last time. I don't know if people will, if they can indicate whether that played well for them. Did it seem okay for you?
The first video, you went fine. You want me to play this one?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here. Brighton Fire Department needs you. We volunteers do a lot here. From fire calls that include motor vehicle and structural emergencies, to first response EMS calls and more. In fact, our department fields about 2,400 calls annually, where we deliver conscientious caring service to our neighbors and strangers alike in their times of need. You may be interested in volunteering. This is the place to find out more. Sign in below and you can go through our online automated webinar. In there you will find 6 short videos, about an hour of your time in total. If you're just here to learn a little bit about the fire service, below are a few great videos about the role of firefighters in Brighton. As always, we're proud to be good neighbors, and we're honored to serve you.
So we are transforming into an online application system, so that with COVID and everything forcing us to do it a different way, again, we needed to be able to manage this solution, and we needed a way that allowed everybody to be involved in the situation to be aware of where everyone was in the process. So I looked at some online solutions, and I needed to make them easy to use. I was unaware of what the price point was, but I knew that that might be an issue. And we have Google systems, so it needed to be compatible with what we already had. And so next slide, please. I'd looked at some you may recognize, some you won't know. Monday.com seems to be advertised fairly extensively. And these are all systems used by industry, especially the computer industry, to manage projects. So I knew I was in the right area. I just had not really had much experience about them. And I found Trello to be the easiest to manipulate and fit into our system. So I'll say here at this point, I received no monetary compensation from Trello. I'm not a salesperson, not anywhere associated with them. So they advertise this as a collaboration tool that organizes your projects into boards and their sales pitches. It tells you what's being worked on, who's working on it, and where something is in a process. And that seemed to fit what we needed. So the best way to describe this is it's like a workspace. If you imagine a whiteboard, and then you can stick stickies on the whiteboard, and the sticky notes each represent, they can be a task, or in our case, represent each person applying to be a member. And then you can add information to those sticky notes, which allows anyone involved in the process to make comments or to add information. So the benefit was, of course, that these all have iPhone apps, iPad apps, desktop apps. So wherever you are, you can access that board and be able to see where anyone was in the process. So now I was going to do it live, but I can't imagine that the Wi-Fi system would have supported. So what I did is I took a bunch of screenshots, and we can quickly go through. Having signed up as a Trello member, and we signed up as a business with a non-profit business, which got us some sort of discount. You can see below that there's a number of boards, but this one's going to be the recruitment board. So you create give it a name. Next slide, please. And you end up with this very blank space, and lots of things are possible on this space. And after a while, it becomes obvious how they all work. But for the first thing, for example, is let me throw in a background that makes it very much obvious what the subject matter is. Next slide, please. And you can import any photograph that's on your desktop. So this is a photo I'd taken quite some time ago. Now we're going to add the lists. Next slide, please. And so what you see there, if it's clear, is we have a list called web inquiries. This represents anybody making an inquiry through the web and gives us a starting place. So this would be a person who had put their information into our web form on our website. And so below that, you have a little card that's created that would have their name on. Obviously, for privacy reasons, I couldn't show you the real board. So I've had to make up some cards to demonstrate. Next slide, please. So you end up with this card, this sticky, where you can add labels. And so the labels I chose were, had they been interviewed? Were they in a pending state? Did we decline to proceed with them? Had they been to a meeting, or were they accepted? And that would give you a very quick reference of where they were in the process. Next slide, please. But then you can actually populate the card, the sticky, whatever you wish to call it, with some fields that allow you to keep track of whatever it is that you feel is important. So for us, the date of the inquiry on the website, their address, phone number, email, whether they'd asked for an application, whether we'd sent them an application, whether we'd received the application back, whether the date they were interviewed, whether they paid the application fee. I mean, you can put in whatever information you need. And for later on, have they been assigned a mentor? And then the other thing is the activity. Every time someone does something on this card, you can record it. So you know who's had contact with the person, who has telephoned them, emailed them, a running log of what's been going on with that person, allowing you to have instant knowledge across your whole team about where they are. Next slide, please. So there, that would populate the web inquiries. All of those people, you would keep adding cards as they made, and then we would arrive at our quarterly meeting. So this says meeting number one first quarter. And those that attended the meeting, you would be able to drag from the list on the left to that meeting list. Excuse me. So now you have a way of moving a person through the process by taking that card and now putting them under the meeting attendee list, giving you a record of that they had received that input that allows you to know that they've been told what is it that they're letting themselves in for. We always require that people get that input before we start the process. We want to make sure that they've had and been told the expectations both of them and if they have any of us. Next slide, please. And so after they've attended the meeting, if they've asked for an application, then I would move them to the applicant list. And again, we would now know where they are in the process, and we know that we need to arrange an interview. That's next slide, please. And as you can see, it becomes fairly simple. It is just a pipeline. You're moving the cards through the lists as they perform the actions that you've described. Next slide, please. So in our system, after they've had an interview, we invite them to go on a medical, and then we would wait for that result to come back. Each card would have a color code telling us where they were in that system. Next slide, please. And then after a medical, if they passed that, we would do some more background checking. Next card, please. And essentially, they would then, having passed all of that, and all of their card would be full of the details, assigned a mentor, and they would finally be admitted into the membership at a membership meeting on the first Monday of the month. So that's the essence of this system, that everybody in the committee would be able to see where anybody was at any point in time. Next slide, please.
Is that right, Paul, or you need the next one?
Yeah, next one, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
Paul, can you go back? Can I go back to this for a second?
Absolutely. If anyone has any questions, that would definitely go ahead.
I know I do. So, and I think I understand, but you're saying under each of these, you have a list of people, and then you can just move them over as they move to the next phase.
Yeah, I didn't do really enough names, but you see that the last name, first name is now under the meeting attendee, and that card is very flexible. It will move. That represents the person. That card moves from list to list as they proceed. But what it does allow you is that if someone does not attend that meeting and 6 months later still wants to be a member, you now have a record of them having tried or at least have contacted you, and there's a history involved. And so what we've done is, having had it running for just over a year, some of the older stuff is archived, but we've never lost it. So if someone, for whatever reason, comes back to us, we can still recover those and be able to, or sometimes, as we've noticed, see what changes. Sometimes things change. So, and that's useful too.
If I'm the RRC looking at everything going on and I see I see Paul there under meeting attendance, and it hasn't occurred, or something hasn't occurred. Is there a way that I see who's responsible, or who I'm supposed to contact? Hey, how come Paul hasn't gone to the next step?
So as you go through learning about the functionality of this board, you can actually assign someone, like if the RRC says, oh, that's something Paul needs to do, you click a button, essentially I get an email that says, hey, can you follow up on this? So you can manage it that way, or you can essentially, there are some automated things that you can do, like every 28 days you get sent an email because you haven't followed up on it, or there is a lot of functionality which I've hardly scratched the surface with, but I've been using it for some other things. I mean, it's got such flexibility just because it works for us. I mean, I think you could devise your own system. However your system works, it's just a pipeline and you can work the way through it. The interesting thing is you can now adapt this to actually follow them through their first 30, 60, 90 days. You can make sure that they get all the material they need to get by having an onboarding board. That's another advantage of using this system, is you actually can follow the recruit and make sure that they have gone through their JPRs, gone through all their training. You could do it. You can expand it to be following the person to make sure they've done everything that you need them to do.
Nice. All right.
So that really is the summary of what we do. We can maintain the contact with the applicant. And that's the thing we were noticing, is if people were not being contacted on a regular basis, they would perhaps drop out of the process. And we were perhaps losing some good people. Although, sometimes you think if it's hard and they still go through it, then you're actually getting a good person. So there's some, if they mount that hurdle, that's good. That's a good sign.
Paul, you want to take questions about the Trello part now before you go into interview?
Absolutely. No, let's do Trello. Keep it all boxed in as if there are any questions, go ahead.
So if anybody has any questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead.
I have one, Spencer. This is Nick.
Go ahead.
So when you purchased the software, was it a blank slate? And then if so, or if not, did you have to work with the vendor to set up your fields and such, and then train administrators to be able to create what you wanted? Or how is the software, the procurement of the software, what do you get? And, can you talk a little bit about that side?
I can. So it is a blank slate, but there is no outside help or administration needed. You literally have the power to create whatever system that you wish. There are many templates that people have already created. For example, this is a board that I could put in their public template, and then if you signed up, you could take this board and adapt it the way that you wished it. So and that's the way I learned to do it, was to see how other people had made their system work and then think, I can make this work for us. So you don't need any administration. It's just however much time you're willing to put in to learn how the system works. And it's very simple, really. That's the main reason that I chose this one, is that it's very visual, which I like. And there was not a lot of technical expertise needed.
Did you find that Trello has quite a few fire service clients?
I did not. I mean, it's just a process management tool. It's used in all sorts of industries, but I did not see emergency services in there.
Okay.
Hey, Paul, it's Bill Morris. How are you?
Hi, Bill. How are you?
Great. So, couple questions. Is there a feature that, like, if somebody's in a step in the process for, I don't know, maybe too long, I don't know what that would be, but does it prompt you? Does it do something to cause you to revisit that?
So, yes, you can set up any means of, call it a tickler, if that's one of the ways you would like to describe it. So, for example, on another board, if it reaches a due date, a label gets put on it, it can be moved from one. I have it set up for some personal stuff where when a bill comes due, the card that represents that bill gets moved to an inbox with a big overdue sticker on it, so that there is some very visual ways that you can say, oh, I need to deal with that card or that person, that task.
Yeah. So what was causing the delay for the onboarding of the new members that this is helping?
Me, I mean, I work full time, and then you have the ability to make sure that everybody, if you want to arrange an interview, then you have to have my calendar has to mesh with the other interviewers' calendar, has to mesh with the applicant's calendar. And so, you know, if you've got 5 or 6 people trying to join at the same time and they're all at different processes, plus you send them an application on a Monday, it might be 2 days before they get it back, or it might be 2 weeks before they get it back, or 2 months before they get it back. So it comes from both sides. And, you know, with the numbers going up, I felt I was juggling too many balls and I needed something that was going to help.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. Even Rick Tracy is going to be able to handle this.
He is handling it very well.
So, Paul, we had another question in the chat. Is Trello a cloud-based system?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay.
I did look into the security to see, obviously, I don't put social security numbers in there. It claims to have industry leading, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically protection. But that is obviously something, depending on your department's policies, that you might want to look at. But it, I haven't seen anything which indicates that it's ever been hacked or anything. It's actually a product of a company called Atlassian, and they do a lot of other industry management software, and they seem to have a big part of the market. This is just one element of it.
You got a few compliments on those videos, and they can all be found on your website, right? brightonfd.org.
The second one is part of the process that we came up with. I don't think that's quite released yet, but that's the idea, is that now we will move to almost the application process is really down to them. They will come to the website. They will watch. We won't need to have a prospective member meeting. They will watch videos that give them that information. They will fill in forms. And if I get it right with the people that we have as vendors, the Trello will be automatically completed by the information they put in the website. So we're taking away the human element of, oh, I've got to do this. It's going to be done automatically, and we can manage it from afar, so to speak.
Nice. All right. Now, through the website up in the chat, if anybody needs it, and of course, I'll send it out an email after this. Any other questions about the Trello part?
Hey, Spence, this is Chief Brower. Paul, good to hear your voice again. Excellent program. Just a quick question on, does this extend into any kind of a retention tool or program for you, whether it's tracking through their probationary period or even further beyond, or does that roll over into another database once they're accepted members?
So it's not being used as that yet. I've indicated that it could be. I mean, there's no reason why. The reason I say that is there are other companies out there who do exactly that. A person, in the same way that you can allow someone access, they can't edit, but they can see, you can give a recruit access to a board, and then there will be a series of steps that they have to do to progress themselves. For example, there will be a list that says first 30 days, and here are the things you need to do in the first 30 days. The ability to attach something like Dropbox or Google Drive means that you can store the relevant paperwork, and then they can check off a checklist to say that they've read it. So you could create, that's what other companies have done, create an onboarding system which would work them through that retention so that you know that they've achieved all those things. And then at the end, you know, and they can put a label says, I don't understand something, or the label says, I've got this, or so that you know that they've been through the process and they don't need any help. We aren't using that yet. We are in the process of revamping all of our systems, and you know, it would be nice if they're all integrated, but that isn't necessarily easy to do. So,
thank you, Paul.
How about the cost, Paul? That was one of the questions in the chat as well, if you don't mind
right,
sharing.
I forgot. No, absolutely. I forgot to look it up exactly, but I believe that we're in as a business, and that for every member that needs to be able to edit and add stuff, there's a monthly fee, which I believe is $9.99. So there's a free version. So if people wanted to go and look at it and just see, you could do that without any cost to yourself or your department. But once you create something where you really want to be able to use it, every person that has full rights will be $9.99 a person. But we have like 2 of us that are members, or 3 of us that are members, and then other people who are invited guests that can't do anything, just observe. So, but the point is, we just want everyone to be able to see. Only a few people need to actually be able to edit and manipulate.
Okay. Any other
there's
questions?
Definitely a very wide range of cost.
Okay.
You can go from $30, $50, $100 a month per person, depending on the extent of the system. Again, that's the reason I chose this one. It seemed like it did what it needed to do at a fairly low cost. And they do give 5013Cs, that's the non-profit, they do give them discount.
Great. Any other questions before Trello, before we move into the interview? All right, Paul, let's go to interviewing. Let's see here. Make sure I'm back on my slideshow. There we go.
So this is, yeah, I think we're good. This is something that, as a result of my past, I was trained in a particular interview technique, which is obviously designed for witnesses and for suspects. But it's a method that allows you to make some decisions about a person. Unfortunately, most people get their information about how people are interviewed from TV shows. And we all know that everyone thinks I can look at somebody and I can tell that they're lying, or at least have a good idea. Unfortunately, psychology tells us that that is not actually true, and that you will probably be no better than a coin toss about actually being able to tell whether someone is BSing you or not. So I thought, and I shared this at the RRC, that there is some techniques that a recruitment person can do that would allow them to have a much better idea. And people need to understand there is no silver bullet. There is nothing that will absolutely tell you. And it came up in an article recently, so that's why I said to Spencer I was going to put it in here. Now, next slide, please. So it's your ability to question somebody that is really key. The appropriate questions during an interview are the vital thing here. Really, you're trying to get accurate and reliable information. Not many people, even the officers that we have been teaching, even this, I've been told how to question people. Everyone thinks that's a skill you just have. And one of the other things that people don't do is they don't realize that when you ask a question, the next thing you should do is not say anything and not interrupt the person answering. And there is a good psychological reason for that. When someone is accessing their memory, it takes them a while to put all their ducks in a row. And we call it interrupting someone's train of thought for a reason. Because if you interrupt them, they basically scatter those thoughts back and they have to reconstruct their memory again. And so what you're going to do is you're going to make it difficult for them to come up with a coherent thought if you're interrupting them. And after all, an interview, it's their information you want, not yours. So it is really good if you can just let them speak as much as possible. Next slide, please. And this may seem obvious, but people have a bit of a misnomer about which are the kind of open questions that get you the information that you need. And open questions are the ones that give you unrestricted answers. You want them to talk. And the type of answer that someone gives to an open question is known as free recall, a recall of information free of encumbrance. And over time, this has been found to be a very accurate form of remembering. So when we ask questions, we want them to be as open as possible because we want them to access their memories and give us the information that they've got stored there. They are accurate. And the open questions, believe it or not, are not what, where, why, when, how. They are, in fact, tell me, explain to me, describe to me, and not very often would you use this, but show me. And we call them TEDS questions. And so those questions, if you think about it, invite this narrative style of response. Can you tell me everything that you did yesterday rather than what happened yesterday? You might get a narrative response with what, but you might get not much. Tell me is just another way of inviting them to come up with a story. You want them to come up with a narrative style of answer. And that is what we call a free recall. Next slide, please. And so those 5 WH questions are more accurately known as probing questions, because once you've got that free recall, once you've asked them that open question and they've told you something, whether it be whatever the information that you're seeking, you can now look into the detail of that question, the detail of that answer, I apologize. So these questions probe for, if you think about it, if you want to know something about a person that's involved in that answer, the who question will give you that. If you want to know something about the location of in that answer, the where question will give you that. If you're looking at times, when will give you that. And if you're looking at things that they did, actions, then the what will give you that. Obviously, motivation can be got from why, and something about how gives you like the quality or quantity, how many or how often did you do something. But these questions generally get very much shorter answers, and you're looking to fill in the detail that they missed in the free recall phase. They get limited response, so that's what you. Now, closed questions are when you're actually confirming. So, did you say that you worked for the Brighton Fire Department previously? Yes, that's a closed question, confirms that your understanding of what they said was correct. So now we have the 3 types of questions that you should try and use when you're going to interview someone. I'll explain why we do it this way. Next slide, please. So experimental studies have said you cannot really observe someone and come up with a way of, are they being honest with you? And even police officers are unable to read the body language of people more often than chance, 50% best. When you have somebody in front of you that is maybe trying to enter your department and not be honest, it would be good to know at the start rather than wait out until something happens that, and everyone would say, how did they get in? But this is some way that you can devise questions that will give you answers, that will give you a hint at whether that person is being totally honest and truthful with you. Next slide, please. So this is, again, you basically, if someone is not being totally honest, you want them to give you as much detail as possible. And you keep asking open questions so that they can have to expand and provide more and more information. The reason for that is that they are unable to maintain what they said. So if it takes a 10-minute interview and then you ask them to repeat what they said at the beginning, unless they've practiced it or become very good, they will struggle to remember what they said at the beginning in terms of their lie. So you can use open questions to gather detail and force them to be accurate in their recollection. You can also it's called cognitive load. A person, if they're thinking about what they're saying, they begin to struggle because they cannot cope with remembering everything that they just said. And if you ask a question that's out of context, that can really force them, changes their whole thought process and really makes it hard for them to maintain any sort of facade about whether they're trying to give you some wrong information. And the best thing to do is to make sure that they're providing you with details that you can check. And one of the examples I will give you is that I did a Facebook search on a volunteer who was coming into the department, and we interviewed him. And one of the questions we asked was, "Oh, do you drink socially?" It was a fairly innocent sort of question, and he said no. And yet I knew for a fact, having looked at Facebook, that he partied quite hard. And so, not that we worried about the fact that he was drinking, but why would he want to lie to us? You now have to believe there's an issue here. And at least it gave us a heads up, because he answered, an unexpected question, probably didn't expect to ever be asked that. Again, probably more in law enforcement, but you don't need to give yourself away. It's better to just keep letting them add to their story, because the more they do that, the more it's going to become obvious, and that they will suddenly realize that they've dug themselves enormous holes and cannot get out of them. And obviously the idea is to provide this conversation rather than interrogation, so that they provide more and more information until they cannot maintain the facade that they've been building up. Obviously, ordinary people, probably it will not be a problem. You will have the detail because they actually did what it is that they said they did. But there are obviously these people out here who want to join, who would like to be a member, don't have the background, or are trying to tell us what they think we want to hear. Next slide, please. And so this is the article that actually prompted me to say, well, maybe this is something that you guys would like to hear about, is that Elon Musk has a question that he asks at every interview. And that question is, tell me about some of the most difficult problems you worked on and how you solved them. And as you can read, pretty much, if you really did have a problem that you solved, however you solved it, you would be able to describe that in minute detail, because you did experience it. Whereas if you did not, it would probably lack the detail, because you would not have actually gone through that process. So you could think of a question that was something to do with something they'd done in their life that they claimed made them a good candidate. And if they were unable to provide you all the details, you would probably have a very good idea that they were just telling you a story just to make it sound like they were more impressive than they really were. Next slide. And so I'm quite happy to answer any questions in relation to the interviewing or the recruitment and retention in terms of Trello. Rick Tracy is our recruitment and retention person and has all the up-to-date information about where we're going with our program right now. And I really appreciate you all taking the time to sit here and listen to me this evening.
Well, there's bound to be questions about the interviewing part. Who's got some good questions for interviewing? Somebody was saying something.
Nice job, Paul.
Commissioner Mexer, how are you, sir? Thank you.
Hey, Paul, so what can we do? There's an obvious law enforcement slant there, with rightly so, given your background. What can we do in our interviews? We need, in our class, and I wish we should have grabbed you to talk about our when we built the interviewing part, but didn't know you then. But what can we do in our interviews? Especially, I could really see this when we're talking about the values that match with their department, or what's your background, that type of thing. What are some questions we can ask?
So the interesting thing is we never actually write down any questions, because all of our information is we pick topics, and the topics come from their answers. So we can say that if somebody is asked a very open question, and I'm trying to think of an example that was fire related, but you can ask them about some experience that they've had. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look at those 2 or 3 sentences that they've said in response to your open question. And you're going to pick some topics and ask them to expand upon that. And the topics that you pick generate to about 4 different areas. So, for example, if they're talking about a past fire department, then they may mention name or they may mention staff. That staff is people. And we have a mnemonic called PLAT, people, location, and time. So in that answer, we're going to say, tell me about the people that you met at that fire department. So what you've done there is if they really were at that fire department and they were there long enough, they should be able to name their chief and other people that they're contact with. But if they were only there for 5 minutes and didn't have that experience, it would be a question they would struggle with. Or you could say, tell me about the location of that accident that you went to. Again, because they've told you about an accident, you can really, what street was that on? You can ask them about the time. How many times did you do something? So what you're doing is drilling down on each of those topics to get them to provide more and more detail. And the more that you do it, the honest and upfront person will have no problem with that. The person that is being providing you BS or deceitful will struggle, and that will become obvious. So you don't need questions. You need to understand what is the detail in their answer that I'm going to ask for. So if it's talking about a person, then that's P. If it's talking about a location, then that's the L. An action is, oh, I climbed Mount Everest. Oh, tell me everything about climbing Mount Everest. It won't take long before they fall flat on their face. And timelines are great because people do not expect, and here's the trick, actually ask them to go backwards through the timeline. It's very hard, like saying your alphabet backwards. They will struggle to do it unless they've really done it.
Huh. Okay. All right.
That's the technique. You try and pick something and ask them detail about that. 4 subjects: people, location, action, and times.
Any questions for Paul on the interviewing?
So, yeah, I have one. This is Nick. So Paul, you're using this technique, and I did a lot of interviewing over the course of my year, but you're using this technique as a way to try to determine truthfulness. You're not doing it as part of your interview to just gather information about their background or about their experiences, because you're gathering all that from either their resume or their certs, or you just trying to use this type of interviewing for determining their level of truthfulness, or a combination of both?
I would say a combination. When you ask a very open question that asks them to give you a lot of information, people are willing to talk to you about their background and that's where they draw their information from. And so if you're looking at, well, why do you want to be a firefighter at this department? Or what other skills can you bring here? They're going to give you a story that they hope provides that information that satisfies your inquiry. But if you ask it in a way that says, tell me everything that you did that involved you in that medical situation, then you're going to find out whether they really did have an involvement in a medical situation or whether they just thought that sounded good. And so we really want to know if they've got those experiences, because that may help us decide, are they going to be a good member? But it also tells us, are you a person we want in our department if you're just going to say whatever you think is going to keep us happy, or if you're not being totally honest?
Copy.
So we don't have to ask many questions. Yeah, it's just filling out, making sure that they are providing us accurate information.
All right. Any other questions?
I've got
Paul,
one, Spencer.
Go ahead.
So I'm wondering about, if you don't have a list of questions that you ask and you accept one member and you don't accept another, is there any concern about whether there was discrimination because you asked one person a set of questions and another a set of questions. And I'm going back to all those years of interviewing people for jobs when I was superintendent in a county level. And, you know, HR was in the room and you could barely breathe with asking people questions. Is it different because it's a volunteer organization?
I don't think we've ever had problems asking anyone any questions. We're seeking information about this volunteer and whether they're going to be and every person is different. So we could never have a standard set of questions. Well, you could, but that would not necessarily take you anywhere. And since everyone's an individual, their experiences of life are completely individual. And so you can't know what might be interesting until they say it. I don't, unless Commissioner Mexer has another, I don't think we've ever worried about the questions. We will write stuff down to make sure they know we've told them about certain things. So we do keep a record of the contents of the interview. We don't necessarily write our questions down because those will be dependent on each person's life experience.
So if I could throw something in real quick, I think that all the questions follow a pattern with each candidate, but of course our goal is to get to know them as quickly and as thoroughly as we can to find out if they would be good members. So we then ask the questions that Paul's talking about to let them lead us to a path that they may choose to lead us to, which then often lets us learn something about them that is either really important for us to know because it's really great, or that they had this gap in their application where they were in jail for 3 years for burglary.
Yeah, I know every.
I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I know when you said we don't have a set of questions, I know everybody's HR hairs just raised up on their arm. Yeah, so certainly something to consider. I think there are differences. You know, we're not competitive in the sense that, oh, well, you're going to get the job or you're not. If you know, you're pretty much allowing everybody in, but there's certainly considerations that each organization needs to take into account in their interviewing and be sure they're doing the right things legally as well. So, but no, I think there's some great points. When you say you don't have a list of questions, you're going down a certain path as far as you start off every interview the same. What do you mean by that when you're heading them down the path, either Dave or Paul?
The application itself, usually you're going through the application and checking the information that they've provided, and then you will get to a part which is allowing you to expand. You know, you say on here that you were a member of Houghton Fire Department. Tell us everything you can about that.
Okay, all right. Oh, that's great. Interesting. Any other questions about interviewing or anything for Paul? Well, that's great stuff. Paul, thanks so much. We'll even give a thanks to David as well. Yeah. for letting you come on.
I couldn't do it without him.
No, great job. Great job. Well, as always, we'd like to give everybody opportunity to ask any questions or talk about anything you're going through with your own department and that you'd like to throw out to the group to see if there's some help, or if we hear a lot of challenges. We really like to hear some successes too. And I hear Paul's success there with, you know, it definitely by the numbers, it looks like there was plenty of success from 2019 to 2020, but anybody else starting to see some success after COVID or some change? Why am I saying after COVID? But now that some vaccines are out, are people a little bit easier to apply, or anybody seen anything different? All right. Anybody have any challenges that they want to bring to the group's attention to see if there's any help for it? Wow. I'm gonna have to get Paul to get y'all to open up. Maybe I'm not asking to open it to questions, Paul. Can somebody tell me if there are any challenges that you have? So see there, I learned something already.
What your challenges are.
Well, if there's not before we close, I just wanted to talk a little bit. There's last time we talked about a Facebook group and we are looking into doing that. Well, I said we're going to do that. The problem, you know, we've got the email system and we send all this stuff. It's not searchable. We did get a SAFER grant. I think I've told y'all last time we did get a SAFER grant to come out with some more resources and to update what we call the ARIT, the Administrative Rapid Information Tool. Sounds fancy, but it's a site that we have that has a lot of information on it for RRCs. But we're going to update it with a forum and do some different things. But we're a little ways out from there. So we're going to start a Facebook group so that you can go in and you can search, you know, documents or questions or resources that we have, and make it flow a little bit better. Might be a little easier to use on your phone as well. So, but we're going to start that. And then we're also, this year, we're getting into Rrc Classes again. So if you know people that need to take it, if you're on here and you need to take it, shoot me an email, because we do have, just like last time, you know, we'll pay for you to go. So don't all you hold out for the Hawaii class. That's not happening. But yeah, we might, we're going to try to go to some states that we haven't been to, and you'll see some more of that coming out. I'd also say that SAFER, and Paul talked a little bit about the resources and changes that they brought about in their department because of SAFER grants. And SAFER closes March 12th, so it's not too late. It's a little bit to get into it, but it's not impossible. And so I hope you'll take advantage of that. A lot of times last year was probably the first time when I heard that there really wasn't. There was a lot of applications last year, but in previous years there had been a lack of applications, and so yeah, take advantage of that. There's a lot of good money out there. There's also a conception that you have to be a fire department. There is an allowance for EMS agencies only, or EMS only agencies. So looking at that, if you got a question, I can help you. You know, I'm willing to do so. So just shoot me a message. Next month we've got Chief Tracy Mosley from Silver Lake, North Carolina, presenting. He is the state rep to the North Carolina Association of Fire Chiefs for their state recruitment and retention program, and he's going to present on how a statewide program can help your individual department. It should be pretty interesting. There's lots of states that have some really great stuff, and then there's some that could really put together some good stuff to help all their departments. And maybe you're the person in that state to get that started. So Chief Mosley will have some good information for that. That'll be the 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and so we'll see everybody back there. Does anybody have anything they want to add? I see Abina. Abina, did you want to add anything?
What was that date?
The 18th. 18th of March.
Hey, Spence.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to try that Trello out and they need to look at my board, I will make it public because there's no information on that one. They can sign up, and then if they email me, I'll tell them how to find, or I can link to that board so they can play with it and see what it can do.
So can I send your email address in the follow-up email that I do to this class?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think that'd be great. That'd be great. All right. Well, if nobody has anything, we'll call it a night. Bina, I think you're right, Walter. Bina, you do have something to say, don't you?
Oh my days, Walter. Now I have to make something up. Anyway, so I'll make it quick. Just something to share from my county. So we operate a points system, and when people meet their points for any given year, we give them gifts. And this year, what we're giving our volunteers is, and I don't know if anybody's seen it, but it's like a phone sanitizer where you put your phone in and you put your keys and it sanitizes it. It's some UV rays something, but it's been very well received. So if anybody's looking for ideas for their volunteers to show appreciation, I know Volunteer Appreciation Week is coming up shortly. So I just wanted to share that with the group in case you're looking for any ideas.
That's a great idea. Everybody needs that.
Yeah.
Awesome. As always. Thank you, Bina. All right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, everybody. It's been great seeing y'all. We'll see y'all next month, hopefully. Have a good one.
Thank you, Spencer.
Thanks, Paul.
Good night. Thanks, Paul.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Bina.
Bye, Chief.